In my wanderings across the city of Zaphira, while I was passing through Market District, I was introduced to a group of Hyena gang members. While they personally were not willing to talk to me on the record about their gang and its activities, they directed me to someone who would. They arranged a meeting between myself and an individual by the name of Big John. We met at an undisclosed location, and after a short conversation, he agreed to do an interview. I will say that Big John admits to various criminal activities throughout this interview, and I do not endorse his actions in any way. I do think it's important that someone like John is allowed to tell their story to the wider public, if for no other reasons than to understand that people like John are made every day in this city. We hope you at least find this interview to be somewhat enlightening and informative.
They call me Big John. I am a member of the Hyena Street gang. No pack affiliation. So, the Hyenas primarily deal in human organ harvesting and cyberware harvesting. Black market deals, that sort of thing. Occasionally deal in narcotics, weapons, armed robbery, extortion, certainly. Well, yeah, like any gang, you kind of do a little bit of it all. Currently, I work as a mercenary between the packs. Somebody needs a job done within the Hyenas, and they need someone with lots of, muscle to handle it. I go ahead for if they're paying. It's hard. Living in sort of this isolated kind of position that one finds himself in. Unlike what some people may think, lots of hyenas, they are Zaphira's lowest of the low. People driven to do these things because, they have no other options. It is not exactly the kind of work that one goes out of their way to do unless you've been left with absolutely no other alternative. Is sort of how it goes. But, it's sort of the way how things work around here. Some of us have the opportunity to live more normal lives, but, debt and that sort of thing can lead people to do all sorts of unpleasantries. It certainly is what left me into pursuing my career as a hyena, and why I have been with the gang for as long as I have. It is certainly not something that I initially went out of my way to do, Unfortunately, got myself into a lot of debt with some bad people, and had to pursue other alternatives to, making sure that I could keep my head above water. And, it turns out I was actually good at the work. As, things went on with the work, eventually you have to decide that this life is right for you or not. By the time I kind of crossed that sort of bridge, that is when I met Coyle. And, she hired me on as a bodyguard for very obvious reasons. I'm a very cut guy. I work out a lot, take good care of myself. My body's a temple. He knew that I was good at what we did, and that I was someone to be feared, and not to be messed with. So yeah, he made obvious kind of decisions that he decided to make me his bodyguard, and eventually I was one of his top enforcers. Then it all went to shit, and the fucking flood hit the city, and then I got picked up in Market, and he got arrested in District Zero. And like I said, I don't know actually where he's doing his time. It could have been District Zero, could have got picked up in Garden. You know, you imagine that, you know, getting arrested in Garden, God help you. Or could be Guardian. Could be Guardian districts, goddamn. It's hard to say. It's hard to say where he's at. No one's really talking. Some people say he's dead even. But I have it under good authority that he got picked up. The sources I have that say such things, I trust them. But no, it's none of the current pack leaders. You know, they all went to shit. You know, he got arrested. It all fractured, and everyone went their own ways, looking out for their own necks. You know, so a lot of the pack leaders, a lot of them have their own territories across the city. Some of them have territories in certain districts, but most of them, you know, well, most of us come out of D0, and that's where most of us still call home. Me, I don't live in D0 anymore. It's too dangerous. Some of the pack leaders, they see me as a threat. I have to be very careful about who I work for and who I talk to. It's not an easy life, being one of the old guard, as it were. But, you know, I do what I can, and I am under no illusions, as it were, you know. I know where this life is going to lead me, and I know what will happen to me eventually. Someone will eventually get my number, and whether they are a hyena or not, could be anybody, you know. Could be you know, Fox Tech. Maybe I do a wrong job, you know, get raided by Fox Tech, gunned down in a hail of bullets by those you know. Could be anybody. Cerberus could take a bad job in Garden, cross the wrong lines in Palace, get taken out by the last line of that crew of the pack, a bunch of street samurai. Who are you kidding, huh? You're a gang like anyone else, and you're not even using original nomenclature. You're calling ourselves packs long before those came along, huh? Don't make me laugh. It's anything could happen to me, you know. Tomorrow I could walk out into the street, get hit by a bus, you know. You know, but a bus hits me, it's gonna be totaled. I mean, look at me, I'm cut like a you know. But, you know, it is what it is. This life is, you know, you think about it, you know, you take on the life of a criminal. You think about all those old movies, right? You think about all those movies, you know, people like to talk about, you know, Scarface, you know, you've seen that movie, huh? Scarface, Godfather, all those movies about mobsters and bank robbers. You know, what's the one thing they all have in common, huh? The bad that these guys, no one gets out alive. It always ends in tragedy, it always ends in bloodshed. You end up dead or in prison, or you end up a rat, you know. You end up a rat, and, you know, you've sold everything out and you're under protective custody, you know. You live this life. It's going to kill you, you know. I'm only 32 years old, but, you know, I could be, I'm definitely, I highly doubt I will live to see the age of 40. You know, it's not, I make no bones about it. It's not for a lack of trying, but, you know, it's a rough life. It's a rough life, yeah. There's a part of me that's holding on to hope that one day Coil gets out. It gets out, and we can go back to the way things were. But the more as time goes on, the more and more I'm starting to believe that those days are past. You know, honestly, I don't see myself taking up with a pack. Part of me's wondered, you know, maybe I'll start a pack, huh? I'm not a name within the hyenas to be, you know, forgotten. Maybe I can make these miserable that think that they can try and, you know, play like any sort of claim to the crown to make them remind them what the hyenas used to be about. You know, what we used to be. You know, a citywide force to be reckoned with. A unified force that could, you know, hold real power in the face of so many other enemies. And, you know, maybe I could make a go at it. But to me, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. You know, I was, like I said, I was Coyle's bodyguard. Huh? You know, he hired me to protect him. He hired me because I was muscle. You know, obviously. I'm not a strategist. I'm not a general. I'm a soldier. And frankly, none of these pretenders are worth my time. Politics, gang politics in Zaphira, it varies by district to district. You know, you go into D0, it's all whispers versus tigers. You know, it's those two killing each other. It's not like guys fighting over corners, you know, drive-by shootings, that sort of thing, you know. It's in D0, it's literally open warfare, you know. These guys absolutely killing each other in droves, you know. But that's D0, you know. It's hard to live anything of something of a normal life with the state of the gang warfare in that district. Then you go anywhere else in the city, it's almost completely different. Yeah, Palace District used to be an absolute, you know, nutcase. You could get away with anything in Palace because there was really no rule of law, you know. Aside from some of the kind of bigger, scarier organizations that used to haunt that place, but as I understand, they've sort of gone quiet now that the district actually has leadership. The criminal fraternity of Palace is slowly but surely changing with the times, and as I understand, it all comes back to a certain someone that, well, he's as dangerous as some of the people are saying. It's probably best I don't say his name. Waterfront's got a lot of different little organizations, gangs and whatnot, clinging to life within its ranks. The Stormbringers are definitely ones to keep an eye on. They've got some interesting things in their pipeline. Yeah, their little haunt down on Copper Street. But Waterfront's a little bit more chaotic. You've got so many little outfits and groups and gangs. You know, there were a few making some noise a few months back, but you know. The ones that are like consistently the ones I hear about within the circles I keep, mostly the Stormbringers. Those are the ones that come up the most. Industrial doesn't really have any sort of... I mean, there are gangs within Industrial. I think the most famous of which would be the Rust Buckets, but, you know, Synths running a gang, as I understand, is more of a survival thing. They don't really seem to be the types to be dealing in blow or, you know, body parts or cyberware. I don't really know of anything that they are dealing with, you know. It's like every district sort of has its own little, like, a niche of crime that it deals in, and quickly Palace is sort of taking his heresy, I suppose, but there's a lot of drugs coming out of Palace. Those who are wondering about some of the narcotics that are coming out of, are showing up. Some of these new ones, the nanite-based stuff. That's the really crazy stuff that's coming out of Palace. That stuff is really scary stuff, man. Yeah, nanomachine-based narcotics. Something that I never really thought possible. I mean, there's some crazy stuff, you know, and when some of those people from Night City started showing up around here, bringing around Black Lace, you know, we thought that they'd completely changed the game. Black Lace was hit this entire city like a plague, you know, and you still have your traditionals. You got your heroin, you got your cocaine, you got your fentanyl, but Black Lace, oh my god, Black Lace really changed the game. But now you got these nano narcotics. I don't mess with this stuff. Some of the crews that have been trying to make their own versions, it's not been going good for them because they've been using nanites from some of these other realities, and as I understand, they've created some pretty scary concoctions. Not something that I would really want to play games with. It's pretty serious. Yeah, no, the drug trade in Zaphira is quickly becoming something that is very volatile. between the black lace dealers, the guys with Maelstrom. You know, Maelstrom are like us. They're kind of all over the city. Fractured, different cells, no real leadership. Maelstrom are kind of a joke, though, honestly. Yeah, they cross certain lines that I certainly wouldn't cross. But, you know, I'm like I said, nowadays I'm mostly doing mercenary work within the Hyenas. I don't really deal with street-level dealing anymore, or the Hyenas' usual bread and butter of collections, let's call it. Yeah, well, you know, it's... I'm sure that some people will take issue with me talking to a media like yourself, but let's be honest. It's, like I said, I have nothing to hide. I've already did my time. And I'm sure that I'm wanted in plenty of other districts for various sorts of crimes, mostly violent. I make no bones about who I am. Come at me if you think you're hard enough. Law enforcement in Zaphira is actually pretty outside of certain districts. I mean, Garden goes pretty hard for it, but I don't go anywhere near Garden. Garden can go itself. No. This is a big city, right? Zaphira is huge. There's tons of room and tons of cracks. And no matter how hard these corporations that think they're in charge, that think they can lock down all of the smuggling routes and hidden tunnels and things throughout the city, there's always another one popping up. You're talking about hundreds of years of this place being built on top of itself. There's always going to be a gap. No matter how hard or how big a wall you put up or how deep you think you go, there will always be a hole that you have not been able to find. Yeah, that's the thing, right? Yeah, they like to think that they're hard on us. They like to think that any gang, any criminal in this city, that they can control it. But as long as there's always people out there that are desperate, you will always have crime. As long as you outlaw things, there will always be those who are willing to smuggle it. There will always be willing to people to be able to sell it. Prohibition of any kind will only bring about a demand and an unregulated market that will be taken over by criminals. And even if you do not make a prohibition on something, all you have to do is make something hard to get a hold of. Regulation. Yeah, any sort of regulation, be it of drugs, organs, cyberware, guns. You will open up a black market. And people like me, well, we are an inevitability. This city's a joke. Historically speaking, you look at the governments and law enforcement throughout human history, you find there's nothing quite like this. This is something of a dystopian capitalist libertarian hellhole. Yeah. The council's not an elected position, it's one you have to fight for. Essentially making the council nothing more than a group of warlords. People that have got the money, got the bodies, and got the power to put themselves in those positions. The Hyenas, we definitely understand that might makes right. So, you know, it all comes down that you have the muscle, you have the money, and you have the power to hold the position that you have. You can rule by kindness or by fear, but you have to have some form of power to wield over your people. Yeah, that's just sort of how it goes in this town. Fall in line, or you die. Yeah, you said that some people's stories are worth telling, whether they are criminals or not. I would argue is that just about everyone's position and place in Zaphira is that of one of a criminal. Now, why do I say that? Well, we live in the shadow of Upper Zaphira. The real people, they're living in the actual, godforsaken utopia. We're squatting in the footprint of their perfect city. Squatting is a criminal act. Each and every single one of us, council or not, we're squatters at the end of the day. And that makes each and every one of us a criminal in their eyes. But that is my opinion on the matter. If there's any advice I could give to anyone living in the city, get out of Zaphira. Get out before it is too late. I think that's enough for now. I've said my piece. At least I can say that I die an honest man. I think that's what anyone could really hope for, is to die knowing that they stayed true to their principles. I may be a criminal, but I have never been a liar. Put that on my fucking tombstone.